Welcome to our discussion about the path to political socialization. Learning, culture, and socialization occur through agents of socialization, the individuals, organizations, and institutions that facilitate the acquisition of political views. Among the most important agents of socialization are family, the media, schools, churches, peers, and political and community leaders. Our political views are also shaped by who we are. Our race, ethnicity, gender, and age all influence how we become socialized to political and community life. Family takes one of the most active roles in socializing us to politics and influencing our political views and behaviors. We learn whether our family members value civic activism by observing their actions and listening to their views. By example, parents show children whether community matters. The children of political activists are taught to be engaged citizens. They may see their parents attend city council meetings, host Democratic or Republican club meetings in their home, or help local candidates for office by volunteering to campaign door to door on a weekend afternoon. Other parents may teach different forms of political engagement. Some young children might attend protests or demonstrations with their parents. Others might learn to boycott a particular product for political reasons. When political activists discuss their own involvement, they often observe that politics is in my blood. In reality, political activism is passed from one generation to the next through example. In other homes, however, parents are not involved in politics or their communities. They may lack the time to participate in political activities, or they may fail to see the value of doing so. They may have a negative opinion of people who participate in politics, constantly making comments like, all politicians are corrupt. They're just in it for themselves, or it's all about ego. Such opinions convey to children that politics is not valued and may in fact be frowned upon. A parent's political apathy need not necessarily sour a son or daughter on politics or civic engagement permanently, however. Instead, first-generation activists often point to external influences such as school, the media, friends, and public policies, any of which can cause someone to become involved in civic life, regardless of family attitudes. Our families influence not only whether or not we are civically active participants in the political process, but also what we believe. While parents or older siblings may discuss specific issues or policies, their attitudes and outlooks also shape children's general political attitudes and ideology. Children absorb their parents' beliefs, whether their parents think the government should have a larger or smaller role in people's lives, whether they value equality between the sexes and the races, whether they consider people in government to be trustworthy, and even specific opinions they have about political leaders. In fact, we can see evidence of how strongly parents' views are transmitted to their children in one of the best predictors of the results of presidential elections. Each election year, the Weekly Reader, a current events magazine that many schools districts subscribe to, conducts a non-randomized poll of its readers. Since 1956, the 1st through 12th grade student poll has correctly predicted the outcome of every presidential election. Children know for whom their parents will vote and mimic that behavior in their responses in the polls. So the moral of this story is the presence of a family commitment to socialization is just as important as the absence of it. All right, so let's discuss the media's ever-increasing role in socialization. An almost ever-present fixture in the lives of young Americans today, the media contribute to the political socialization of Americans in many ways. Television, radio, and the internet, and various forms of electronic entertainment and print media help shape America's political perspectives. First, the media, especially television, helps shape societal norms. The media impart norms and values on children's shows such as Sesame Street, Barney, and Dora the Explorer, which teach about racial diversity and tolerance. For example, Barney's friends include children with and without disabilities. These shows and others reflect changing societal standards and values. The media also reinforce core democratic values. Television programs such as American Idol or The Biggest Loser or SiriusXM's radio's 20 on 20 incorporate the principle of voting. Viewers decide which contestant stays or goes, or listeners pick which songs are played. Second, the media also help determine the national agenda, whether they are covering the war in Afghanistan, sex abuse scandals, global climate change, or congressional policy debates. The media focus the attention of the American public. This attention may then have spillover effects as people demand action on a policy issue. We will see later in this unit, for example, how media coverage of the Tea Party movement propelled that organization's policy priorities to the forefront of the national political scene during the 2010 congressional elections. Third, the media educate the public about policy issues. Local and national news programs, news magazine shows, and even comedy such as The Colbert Report and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart Yes, those really are comedies, not news programs. Inform viewers about current events, the actions of policymakers, and the public policy challenges in communities, states, and the nation. Finally, the media, particularly television, can skew people's perception of public policy priorities and challenges. The oft-quoted saying, "If it bleeds, it leads," demonstrates the attention that most local news stations focus on violence. Although crime rates have dropped since the 1970s, the reporting of crime, particularly violent crime, on nightly news broadcasts has increased. Even national news broadcasts and talk shows fall prey to the tendency to emphasize visual news: fires, floods, auto accidents, and plane crashes. Although these stories are important to those involved, they have very little long-term impact on a society as a whole. But because they pique viewer interest more effectively than, say, a debate in Washington or in a state capitol, news programs devote more time to them. Internet news sources also cover these dramatic events, but the sheer number of internet news sites and blogs make it more likely that at least some of them will also cover more important news, and people interested in political events and debates can find internet news sources that cover such events and issues. Okay, so let's move on to the next one: schools, patriotism, and civic participation. As early as kindergarten, children in the United States are socialized to believe in democracy and express patriotism. Schools socialize children to the concept of democracy by making the idea tangible for them. On election day, children might vote for their favorite snack and wait for the results at the end of the day. Or they might compare different kinds of apples or grapes or different books and then vote for a favorite. Lessons such as these introduce children to processes associated with democracy at its most basic level. They learn about comparing attributes, choosing a favorite, voting, and winning and losing. Children also are taught patriotism as they recite the Pledge of Allegiance every day, sing patriotic songs, and learn to venerate the Founding Fathers, especially George Washington and other American heroes, including Abraham Lincoln, Dr. Martin Luther King, and John F. Kennedy. Traditionally, elementary and high schools in the United States have emphasized the great men and great moments form of history, a history that traditionally concentrated solely on the contributions of men in formal government or military settings. Increasingly, however, the curriculum includes contributions by women, African Americans, and other minorities. Education also plays a pivotal role in determining who will participate in the political affairs of the community. Research indicates that higher levels of education are associated with higher levels of political activism. That's something important to note because the AP will ask you about that. In a book on civic volunteerism, authors Sidney Verba, Kay Schulzman, and Henry Braid write, "Well-educated parents are more likely to also be politically active and to discuss politics at home and to produce children who are active in high school. Growing up in a politicized household and being active in high school are associated with political engagement." Let's examine the last form of socialization, and that's religion. The impact of church and religion in general on one's political socialization varies a great deal from individual to individual. For some people, religion plays a key, defining role in the development of their political beliefs. For others, it's irrelevant. For many years, political scientists have examined the impact religious affiliation, whether one is Catholic or Jewish, Protestant or Muslim, has on political preferences. For example, religion is related to how people view various issues, especially the issue of abortion. But more recent analysis show that a better predictor of the impact of religion on voting is not so much the religion an individual practices, but rather how regularly he or she practices it. In general, it seems that those who regularly attend religious services are more likely to share conservative values, something else the AP might ask you, and support Republican candidates in general elections, something else that the AP might ask you. Research also shows that this relationship between frequency of church attendance and identification with the Republican Party is particularly strong among white Protestants, but less so among Catholics, who are generally more democratic, and among African Americans. African American voters are even more likely than Catholics to vote for a Democratic candidate, but are also likely to have higher levels of religiosity, as measured by frequency of attending services. This chart shows the breakdown in party affiliation by religiosity. The results are based on respondents' assessment of the importance of religion in their lives and their frequency of church attendance. Note that a large portion of highly religious people, 34% of Americans, not shown in the figure, are Republicans or lean Republican in voting. Party identification is nearly evenly divided among the religious, 18% of Americans, with 42 and 40% identifying, 44%, identifying themselves as Republican leaners, and Democrats, Democratic leaners, respectively. Among the less religious, 32% of the population, a large proportion, 48%, identify themselves as Democrats, Democratic leaning, as do a majority, 56%, of the not religious, 16% of the population. Though there is a strong link between religiosity and political party, the difference between the proclivities of religious and non-religious voters are applicable only to white voters, as discussed later in the unit. African Americans are likely to be Democrats no matter how religious they are. And although religious Latinos are more likely to be Republican, by and large, majorities of Latinos identify themselves as Democrats. We'll break this down in a later Prezi. Nonetheless, the relationship between religiosity and party identification is an important factor in American politics, particularly to the extent that religiosity shapes political views on social issues, abortion or gay marriage, say, and renders them moral imperatives for voters rather than mere opinions. So this has been our discussion on the path to socialization. Please make sure that you complete the quiz associated with this Prezi.